Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Today I wanted to talk to you about propagating geraniums. I grew some beautiful coral colored ivy geraniums last summer and I hated the idea of tossing them into the compost pile at the end of the season. So I decided to take some cuttings of them and you are seeing the result of that. So I want to show you first of all how I did the cuttings and then we'll go from there. Each cutting had a stem and 2 pairs of leaves. I put all of them into a large pot filled with potting soil and then placed the pot inside a clear plastic bag for about 10 days. The pot was located in a nice light area. The bag will increase the humidity, which in turn helps the cuttings take root. Pretty soon I saw some new leaves start to sprout, which was really exciting, and the plants have grown really well. As they were developing those new leaves though, anytime they started to send out a flower bud, I snipped that off because I really wanted the plants to focus their energy on developing a good root system. But finally I'm letting them bloom because this is such a pretty color and there's no point in not having some color in the house, right? But the thing is, they're getting quite leggy. I'm not all that surprised because it's an ivy geranium and that is a trailing plant. But why not take some cuttings from these cuttings? So that's what I want to show you today. And the whole point of today's video is to not be afraid of propagation. Maybe you feel like you don't know how to do it or you're afraid you're going to fail. But the point of propagating your plants is that you have nothing to lose, right? You're going to either get more plants from what you already had, or maybe it's not going to work and you're going to learn from it. So let me show you how I take these cuttings and where I go from there. So here's a plant I want to take a cutting from. And if you look at this, what you can see is the stem with the leaves coming out in pairs. At the very top, I've got a couple of flower buds that we're going to sacrifice, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off right above this last leaf here. And there's my cutting. I know that looks a little scary. So here's my remaining plant. And then I'm going to strip off the bottom pair of leaves. So that gives me a bit of stem to put in some soil. And I'm also going to trim off this top here. So there is my cutting. I have 2 pairs of leaves and a stem. Now that I have my cutting, I wanted to point out that I really don't feel it's necessary to dip it into a rooting hormone. It seems like geraniums are very easy to root, so you don't need to go through that step. I'm going to push it down into a pot that is filled with some potting soil that's been lightly moistened. And when I push this down, I'm going to stop it about ½ an inch before where these leaves come out of the stem. And then I'll press the soil around the stem. Now I'm putting this over on the side because I'm going to take another cutting and put it into this side of the pot. And then later I'll separate them. Now I'm going to put this into a plastic bag just to increase the humidity, and we'll leave it there for about 2 weeks, and then let's check back and see how they're doing then. Well, it's actually been about 3 weeks because I've been a little bit too busy in the last week, but I did want to show you how things are coming along. So these 5 pots are the plants that I took the cuttings from. You'll recall that I trimmed them way back, and they have all kinds of new growth on them now and they're looking good. This time of year I really don't want these big long trailing plants that are leggy and straggly. I really am trying to keep them somewhat compact, and I get extra plants from the cuttings I take, so that works out really well. Now if I flip this flat around, these 2 pots contain the 6 cuttings that I took the other day. Now I have a couple of yellow leaves, and that is to be expected when you take a cutting. After a little bit the leaves die. But I do have new growth coming out of the tips of them, new growth here as well. Now when you've taken cuttings, after 2-3 weeks or so, you can test them very carefully to see if perhaps roots are growing. And that is by just gently sort of pulling upwards on the cutting, not yanking it, but just to see if there's some resistance, because that indicates that there is root growth going on. Now, if it just pulls right out, you know there's no roots, I would carefully tuck it back in, press the soil around it, and hope for the best. But I am going to dump out one of these pots and we'll see what's happening. Well, I have to admit I was a little nervous about this, but look here, a really nice root coming out of this cutting. I'm trying not to mess with the other ones very much because they're so delicate at this stage. I'm going to carefully put them back into their pot, and then once I start seeing some roots coming out of the bottom of this pot, I will pull them up, separate them, and each of them will get their own pot. Well, as you can see, this method is very simple and it works. You know, even if these cuttings hadn't taken root, I'm not out anything, am I? I still have my original 5 plants, and it just means I think about what I did wrong or if there was something that was out of the ordinary, and I'll try it again when these guys grow a little bit more. So be brave, take cuttings, and see how you do. I'll see you next time. Take care.